let's talk Utah Jazz trades and NBA trades because it has already kind of been crazy. And for the last week or so, we've really been following the Harrison Barnes rumor mill with the Knicks and the Celtics supposedly offering first-round picks. Well, with this Tyrese Haliburton deal that came down yesterday, and I think that shocked the NBA, a lot of people kind of fell off the Harrison Barnes bandwagon. And now we're starting to get back into that. And many people, as we've been telling you for a couple of weeks, the Kings have had the ability to make deals with several teams. And obviously, they've played the waiting game through this deadline. And I don't know what they were thinking on the Tyrese Haliburton deal. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But Harrison Barnes to the Jazz is a possibility. I do not believe it's likely. And the issue is that I'm told the Knicks and the Celtics are willing to give a first-round pick to get Harrison Barnes. If the Celtics are unable to make the Malik Beasley, T-Wolves, Marcus Smart deal, I think the Jazz have almost no chance of getting Harrison Barnes because Harrison Barnes fits exactly what the Boston Celtics need. And I think the Knicks would really like to have him. I think the Lakers would really like to have him. Although I think the Lakers and Jazz are in very similar situations, that they are kind of landlocked by one awful contract and a lack of assets beyond that. So I think it's very difficult to think that the Lakers would be able to land Harrison Barnes as well. But all of this to say, I think Harrison Barnes, Jake, would be a great fit with the Jazz.
Yeah, I think Harrison Barnes is a little bit more athletic than a couple of the guys you have on the roster right now. And I think he's a veteran, and I think he's got a lot of experience specifically in the postseason. You know, he had his run with Golden State back in the day, and I think that Harrison Barnes would be a good addition. But again, this is what we always talk about. For the Jazz, it's kind of tough sledding right now when you're trying to compete with other teams who have a first-round pick to offer. I mean, where do you go if you're the Utah Jazz? Because basically, you're just offering, players for players. You know, they do have one first-round pick, but that's like several years off. That's like 26. So to me, I love what I'm hearing that Danny Ainge is doing. You know, he's out there, he's on the phone, he's trying to make something happen, and I think that's all that you can ask him to do, you know, and I think the real conundrum here, if you're Danny Ainge and this front office team like Justin Zanuck and everybody, you're trying to make deals and trying to get better. But at the same time, you know this summer is go time for rebuilding this team. So if you are, my feeling is, this is my opinion, right? We haven't been told this, but my opinion is if you're Justin Zanuck, Danny Ainge, you're this team trying to get deals done, you know, you're probably doing that with the mindset of, okay, we need to make all the calls. We need to make our highest and best effort here. But we also understand, hey, if it doesn't get done, you know, we're going to look to the summer to really start to make some big time moves. So if they don't get Harrison Barnes, is it the end of the world? No. Would it be great if they got Harrison Barnes? Absolutely. I think, you know, if you were able to even just swap Harrison Barnes for, let's say, a bogey, I think that might be a slight upgrade. Like I said, I think Harrison Barnes is probably a better defender than Bogdanovich. I think, you know, offensively, they're probably pretty close. You know, Bogey's probably a better three-point shooter. Harrison Barnes probably has him in the mid-range. So it kind of just depends. But I don't think there'd be anything wrong with them going and getting Harrison Barnes. But again, to your point, I think it's going to be tough for them to win that battle because they don't have the first-round picks.
Yeah, and I think the hardest thing for me is that if I'm the Sacramento Kings, this Tyrese Haliburton trade is mind-numbing. Like I am in awe. In listen, the Kings, nobody is going to mistake them with one of the best organizations in sports. They routinely make big mistakes in player personnel. But I feel like even this deal is unfathomable. Tyrese Haliburton is a guy that shoots the three over 40%, is dropping dimes on a regular basis. He's 21 years old, and he's already a significant contributor in the top half of his position group.
Yes.
He's already a guy that franchises saw as somebody they could build around. The Indiana Pacers gave up, and I understand, Domantas Sabonis is a 25-year-old hybrid center. He is a really good player. I get that you have struggled in the middle, that you are languishing with Alex Len. Totally understand the Marvin Bagley situation. You don't trade one of the most dynamic young point guards in the NBA for a center.
Yeah.
I think it's just a huge mistake. I think that if you'd have traded De'Aaron Fox to the Knicks when they wanted him, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You would likely be a playoff team already in Sacramento. And if you listen to Woj on ESPN, yesterday he was saying that Sacramento made this trade because they felt like Sabonis put them in the playoffs. Well, what did Haliburton do for you? And that's the thing I can't get away from. So when we look at all of these deals that are being made and where the Jazz are, trades are possible. And if we learned anything yesterday, there's a sucker born every deal in this league. There's a buyer and there's a seller in every single trade. CJ McCollum got sold to New Orleans. And that trade is amazing to me. That the Portland Trailblazers, who had one of the worst cap situations, who had talent that just was an awkward fit, have figured out a way to completely remake their roster, and they are set up to be one of the most dominant forces in the summer ahead of us, the 2022 summer offseason. The Blazers have all the assets at their hands. And it's largely because the New Orleans Pelicans traded for CJ McCollum, who's overpaid and hasn't won anything. That's the thing that I'm amazed. Like, am I overvaluing? I guess maybe I'm overvaluing Haliburton. Am I undervaluing CJ McCollum?
Well, I think no. So no, I don't think you are with either of them. I think you're spot on with both of them. CJ's a great player who hasn't won a damn thing, and that's been the problem in Portland. They haven't won anything. Haliburton is a guy that I completely agree. He's 21 years old. He's a hell of a player, and there's a ton of upside left. You can see where when you watch him play, obviously he plays, did play for the Kings. Like, it's obscure Kings basketball, right? So there's probably not a ton of people watching him play. But being that we don't have a life and we do watch all these games, watching him play, there is a lot of room in his game to improve, even still with how good he is. So, yeah, I was shocked to see them move Haliburton. I think the McCollum thing is brilliant basketballing by the Portland Trailblazers. I think the New Orleans Pelicans got sold on this concept of Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, and some guy named Zion Williamson who seemingly doesn't play basketball anymore.
Yeah.
And I, again, earlier this week, I tweeted, about Zion. Is Zion still even in the NBA? Jokingly, right? Like, tongue in cheek. Like, yes, he's still in the NBA, but the guy never plays. And when he did play, he really was a disappointment. And that's the unfortunate part. And I think, so for New Orleans, do I like the concept of Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum together? Absolutely. I think CJ McCollum is a player that can take you to the playoffs. Is he a championship caliber player? That's a different conversation. But at least he can improve that team. So if you're New Orleans, I get why you did this deal. But at the same time, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, yeah, Portland did this deal because they have higher aspirations, and Dame's clock is ticking. Dame's clock is almost out of time.
31 years old.
He's not got a lot of time left, and by NBA standards, he probably got 5 years, That's that. I mean, again, that's not a lot of time by NBA standards. So, yeah, I get it. So, I guess to answer the question, the Haliburton trade is by far the worst trade. If we're talking about why would you trade that guy, that's by far one of the dumbest trades I've ever seen if you're the Kings. I mean, Haliburton's going to be a star in this league and basically already is. I look at what Portland did. I really like it. I think it's probably 3 or 4 seasons too late. I would have done this sooner, but hey, they did it. It's, obviously it's their decision. And then if you're New Orleans, this isn't the first time New Orleans has been fleeced, right? This isn't the first time that New Orleans has been sold and taken advantage of, right? We all remember the Anthony Davis situation. So, like I said, I think in the NBA, it is a dog-eat-dog league, right? You have your handful of teams who are good every single year and are going to make the tough decision and they're going to take risks. And 9 times out of 10, those risks work out. And 1 times out of 10, you have Russell Westbrook on a $40 million player option, right? So that's what the league is. But
He has a $47 million
is it
player
47,
option next year.
$47 million?
Russell Westbrook.
You're not moving that contract. And so my point in all of this is just to say, if we bring this back to the Jazz are in between a rock and a hard place. And just the same way that the Portland Trailblazers traded CJ McCollum and made the tough trade, if you will.
Yeah.
The Jazz are going to have to do that same thing this summer. They're going to have to pick a guy, and I don't know who that guy is. I don't know if it's Rudy or if it's Bogey or who that guy is going to be, but you're going to have to trade one of these big names on your roster to start the process of rebuilding or retooling.
I think there is a lot of value. I think there's a lot of value in not making a deal.
Yeah.
I think there's even more value in making the right deal. I understand that you really value a guy like Harrison Barnes.
Right.
But think about it, and there is a scenario where, let's say, what do the Jazz need? I think the Jazz need a quality backup center.
Yep.
And I think the Jazz need a wing defender and offensive force.
Mm-hmm.
That's Harrison Barnes.
Right.
The backup center very easily could be Rashawn Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
Rashawn Holmes is the guy that you hoped, by the way, that you were getting this offseason, that Hassan Whiteside has not been. I'd rather have Rashawn Holmes, who we covered in Phoenix.
Yeah.
I'd rather have Rashawn Holmes than Hassan Whiteside.
Yes.
Now, if you want to make a deal head-to-head, and I can't believe the Kings would do this, I'm not saying this is a deal that will happen, but I'm not telling you that the Kings are trading Harrison Barnes to Utah because I don't think they are.
Yeah.
Not at this moment. If you want to trade Harrison Barnes and Rashawn Holmes to the Utah Jazz for Joe Ingles and Bojan Bogdanovic, I'm all about that.
Mm-hmm.
That trade financially works. That trade, I think, makes Sacramento more of a playoff contender, and I think it answers a lot of questions for the Utah Jazz. There's not a chance in the world that the Kings are going to do that, because I think if the Kings make a deal with the Knicks for Obi Toppin and a first-round pick, I think that if the Knicks are willing to include a different selection of player, I don't know why, if you are the Sacramento Kings, you don't make that deal right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the thing that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
I look at, if you're a Utah Jazz fan, names like Josh Hart, names like Tyrese Haliburton should be infuriating to you, because those are guys that have real value on this Utah Jazz team.
Yes.
Josh Hart is a guy that I've talked about on this show repeatedly as somebody I would love to see in a Jazz uniform. You're going to see him a lot because now he's in Portland. And this is the problem that you have as a Utah Jazz fan. And if you're Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck right now, because, by the way, I talked to my Jazz guy again, and he was saying that Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge are working closely together. And that, Ryan Smith is involved to a certain extent, but Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck are working well together.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing everything that they can do to make a deal. And league sources told me yesterday that they were trying to make a deal almost to the point of desperation. They were trying to make a deal to improve their wing athleticism.
When you hear that, and this is where my mind goes to about these conversations. So when you hear that, hey, the Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck are trying to make a deal almost to desperation.
Yes.
What does that say to you? Like, does that say that they're desperate to make a deal happen for the sake of it? Does that mean that they're trying to make a deal because there's such a sense of urgency to get better? Like, when you hear that, what do you think of that?
I think that the Utah Jazz realize they are not one of the top 5 teams in the NBA right now. And I think that Danny Ainge, as it's been described to me, Danny Ainge is a pragmatic thinker. He understands that there's not a trade available to him that makes this Utah Jazz team a championship contender. But then again, stranger things have happened. You just need to get into the postseason as healthy as you can be. And we're seeing now that this team has legitimate health issues. But you need to get into the postseason tournament just as healthy as you can be, because anything can happen.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we've seen that, regardless of health, teams can win championships. We've seen, Giannis Antetokounmpo last year battling what most people thought was a season-ending knee injury all the way to a championship. So you realize very quickly that if the Jazz can make a deal, and this is why I say this Harrison Barnes deal is really important, because if the Jazz can somehow, some way, end up in a trade where Harrison Barnes wears the note on his chest, if that happens, this is a dramatically different team. It injects energy and enthusiasm into this locker room. And I think one of the things that it does is it brings a ring to the locker room, as in a championship ring. He has played on arguably one of the best teams in the history of the NBA.
Right.
And so when you have that experience, which you have none of right now, one of the things the Jazz are trying to do is remake the culture away from mediocrity into nothing short of a championship is going to suffice. So when you look at a guy like Harrison Barnes, yes, he's an upgrade on court. There's no doubt that his basketball ability is an upgrade to the Jazz. But his mentality is an upgrade to the Jazz. His professionalism is an upgrade to the Jazz. You have to learn how to win at this level. To win a championship is as much about physical ability as it is about education. And the Jazz don't know how to win. They don't know how to close. They had the Clippers on their deathbed last year and could not close.
Yeah.
That's what Harrison Barnes brings to you. I still believe that deal is highly unlikely.
Yeah.
I mean, if they got Harrison Barnes, this is now a team to really keep an eye on.
Yeah.
This team's going to go as far as Don and Rudy take them, period. This Utah Jazz team in 2022 will go as far as Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. But, man, I'm telling you, if you can put Rashawn Holmes in there, because that's the guy that's really important to finish that trade.
Yeah.
You need Rashawn Holmes. You need that guy. I don't have much interest in Marvin Bagley, to be honest with you. Alex Len is a poster on a nightly basis. I'm not interested in Alex Len. Rashawn Holmes has real value in that deal. And if you want to take, because if you think about what's a win for the Jazz, bringing in a guy like Harrison Barnes with Rashawn Holmes and keeping Jordan Clarkson, that's a win, right? But you're making a deal with a team in Sacramento who's only making deals because they are trying to get into the tournament. They're trying to get into the playoff tournament, right? So they're going to want more offense. They're going to want more than Bogey and not a body in Joe Ingles. And this is probably the make or break on this deal, right? Sacramento's making trades because they believe that they believe that Sabonis gives them a better chance to get into the postseason than does Tyrese Haliburton. And I think what they're doing is they're going all in on De'Aaron Fox to try and get into the postseason.
Yeah.
Okay, win, lose, draw, bad idea, good idea, I don't know.
At least they have direction.
That's what their mission is to get into the play-in tournament, right? So are they going to take a dead contract in Joe Ingles? Because they don't seem focused on the summer or their cap situation, or they want guys that can contribute and help them get into the tournament. So I don't know that Joe Ingles' contract has a lot of value to them.
Yeah.
That's the thing that really stands out to me.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that, again, I still think that there are teams in the league from a trade perspective that can be had. And I think that the Kings are one of those teams. I think, again, making these trades, if we get away from the X's and O's of it and players, and if we talk about it from the perspective of just being on the phone with somebody, I mean, a lot of making these trades is a sales process. You're Danny Ainge. You're going to call this guy and you're going to say, hey, I'm Danny Ainge. Let's figure something out. Here's what I'm thinking, and here's my proposal to you. And so I think Danny Ainge is very good at that. But there is no getting away from the first-round draft pick thing. So, yeah, if there's a Harrison Barnes deal to be made, I would love to see them make it. I just think I agree with you 100%. I just think it's going to be really tough, and that's unfortunate, but it is the position that they're in. And so if nothing happens, okay, I won't be upset with this team. I just think that really, though, means that this summer you're going to see some pretty significant movement on this roster. I just don't think there's any way around that.
Yeah, and I also think you need to monitor what, the Phoenix Suns have been very quiet. And one of the things that, I hear a lot about is, are the Suns just going to stand pat with what they have? I don't know the answer to that question because I think that they definitely would love more punch off the bench, but I don't think they're going to do anything that would even risk the chemistry on that club.
Yeah.
Because the Phoenix Suns are very good right now. They are elite. And they need small tweaks, which to me doesn't scream of a trade. It screams of development in the last 2 months of the season.
Yeah.
So I think the Suns are very quiet. I think, oddly enough, I think I'm a little surprised Golden State hasn't done something. Looking at where they are, I think they're expecting Klay Thompson to improve at a very rapid pace, and I think we're seeing that now. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked
It's
about
happening.
this yesterday, that the ball's going through the net for Klay Thompson now.
Well, and I think if you're the Warriors, you're looking at this team and you're like, you're very much in the same boat as the Suns. I mean, again, they don't have the record the Suns do for obvious reasons, but again,
Yeah.
that doesn't really matter once you get into the playoffs, other than seeding purposes. I think if you're the Warriors, your mindset is, okay, let's get the best seed that we can. And then, let's figure it out from there. So for the 3rd seed or for the 2 seed or whatever, I mean, that really just doesn't matter all that much. However, if you're looking at this roster, you're saying, okay, we need to develop Kuminga as much as we possibly can before the playoffs get here. So that when the playoffs are here, he gives us that valuable 15-point, couple of assists maybe type performance that really can put us over the top in the postseason in a 5 or a 7 gamer. And I think that the Warriors are going to put the 3 of those guys back together, and Draymond, Steph, and Klay, and they're going to try and run it back. And I think, Klay is obviously improving. I think they're resting the hell out of Draymond because they know they're going to need him on the back end, and they're going to be just fine. I think they're going to be a problem in the playoffs. I really do. I think the Suns are this year's Jazz team. I think they're playing their ass off. I think they're really good, but now they got to come and show that they can get back to the NBA Finals. And so, hey, if they're the 1 seed, that's all fine and dandy. But again, it's what you do in the postseason.
Yeah, and I also think you got to wonder, what the Jazz are going to do with Joe Ingles' minutes. I think that's a big question because, we've been telling you, for several weeks now that the Jazz and Celtics have talked a lot about Marcus Smart. And I was told the other day that deal is now dead because the Jazz simply don't have the nuts to make that deal happen. But I was also told yesterday that the Jazz are still very interested in Josh Richardson, and his deal is very affordable, and he's having a nice season for Boston. But the question for Boston is, what's the upside of trading Josh Richardson right now? Because you're in a very advantageous position with Richardson in that he's affordable and he's contributing.
Yeah.
He's fit nicely into that group. And the one thing that the Boston Celtics seem to be missing is that big body, is that consistent performer in the front court. And the Jazz don't have the answer to that.
Yeah.
I would love to see the Jazz add either Harrison Barnes or Josh Richardson. I think both of those would be very nice pickups. But again, I think Josh Richardson's a guy, excuse me, I think Josh Richardson's a guy that's going to be very coveted at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And all of these things, and this includes Harrison Barnes, all of these teams, Sacramento, Boston, the Lakers, they all have options because they have assets in the physical. The Jazz don't have the physical body. They're trying to upgrade their manpower because, again, and I think this is a very interesting question on how you replace Joe Ingles' minutes because he wasn't just a 10-minute-a-night guy.
Right.
That's a guy that was playing 20, 25 minutes a night depending on the opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So, who's going to get those minutes? So far, it's not been one of the other big bodies, right? I mean, I think you look at guys that are coming off the bench, it's not Elijah Hughes. It's very clearly been Trent Forrest.
Yeah.
But Trent Forrest has not given you the consistency from 3 that you had hoped for. Hadn't always gotten out of Joe this year.
Yeah.
But Trent Forrest, I don't think, is the guy to step into that role. I think ultimately the Jazz have to shit or get off the pot on Elijah Hughes.
Yeah.
It is time to allow him to shoot consistently for you. Because when you've given him the opportunity to shoot the ball, he's done quite well. And yet he still isn't a guy there. So let's surmise that Elijah Hughes isn't the guy Quinn wants. Who's the guy that Quinn Snyder's willing to give those minutes to? That's my biggest question. Because right now, I don't think that guy's on this roster. I don't think Quinn likes anybody outside of Jordan Clarkson and Rudy Gay. And I really don't think he's that in love with Jordan Clarkson.
Yep.
Because I think he's seen that Jordan's kind of a wild card. And I think what that does is that pigeonholes Rudy Gay into playing the at times 2, 3, and 4 position, and a lot of times 5, depending on where you're at with Hassan Whiteside. Mm-hmm. Because right now the other question is Rudy won't be back tonight, apparently against Golden State. When Rudy comes back, does Doak stay as the backup center, or are you going to go back to Hassan Whiteside?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess based on Quinn's behavior, it would go back to Hassan. I mean, that's what
I would guess
assume.
Because again, with Doak, I just don't see him as a number 2 center in the NBA. I really don't. I think that his confidence goes up when he starts, but when Rudy Gobert plays, I mean, obviously, we're talking about 10 minutes a night.
Right.
You don't need, if Rudy Gobert's not on the floor at least 35 minutes, they're probably not winning games.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's very difficult the way when Rudy Gobert plays, right? When he's out of the lineup, we've seen that Donovan's a different type of player. Like the whole dynamic is different.
Yeah.
When Rudy Gobert is healthy and playing, and he's playing 35, obviously it's going to have to push 40 minutes at some point. But when he's playing 35, 40 minutes a night, I mean, you need a 5-minute run out of Doak or Hassan Whiteside. And I think the more and more we go on, the deeper and deeper we get into March and April, I think that 5 spot's going to go to Rudy Gay unless they make a deal.
Yeah.
And that's why I say with like the Harrison Barnes trade, I would absolutely be asking for Rashawn Holmes. I'd be saying, hey, let's go. Hey, we'll give you Bogdanovich. We'll give you Joe Ingles' expiring contract in return for. Now, the question is, do the Jazz include their 2026 first-round pick? And is that enough to get it done? Because if memory serves, the Knicks are talking about trading their upcoming first-round pick, right? And you look at, the other suitors for Harrison Barnes. I mean, they have assets that the Jazz don't have.
Yeah, the competition's real.
So
for sure.
I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens I think the next 24 hours will determine success or failure at the trade deadline. Because there's a lot of names. Nobody expected Tyrese Haliburton to get moved. Mm-hmm. I think we all knew. I mean, we told you the other day before it happened. We told you yesterday morning that CJ McCollum was getting traded.
Yeah.
We had heard that on Monday. But if you look at the names that are left, I just don't see right now, as we sit here, that there's a home for Jeremy Grant of value to the Detroit Pistons. I don't think that there's enough move there. I mean, frankly, the other guy that's out there that's being talked about a lot is Pascal Siakam. I just don't know what his value is in the open market. I don't know, or I should say the trade market. He's not a free agent. I wonder what it is. And by the way, Toronto's also got the Goran Dragic contract. Mm-hmm. I think it's $19 million worth of an expiring contract. That's a huge contract that's expiring, and he's a physical, ready-to-play guy.
Can bring value.
That can bring value to you. So I think Toronto's one to watch. I think Boston's one to watch. I have to believe they trade Marcus Smart. They have 2 deals in place. They could make a deal with Minnesota right now and get that done if they want to trade Marcus Smart, and I think they do. I think Malik Beasley, the question is, in the argument from what I understand, is what are they getting in return for Malik Beasley, and is Marcus Smart enough? Because they also want McDaniels in that deal, and I'm
sure they do.
Again, I don't know why Minnesota would do that, but you add Marcus Smart, at the 2-3 in that Minnesota lineup, and all of a sudden they're a little bit different of a team.
Yeah.
But at what cost? And so what you're doing is you're saying, hey, Malik Beasley plus what? If we're going to give you Marcus Smart. Because let's not conflate the situation. Marcus Smart has real value in this league. Marcus Smart is a gritty, determined, mentally tough guy who in pressure moments doesn't mind shooting. Now, his three-point shot's trash. He's still going to shoot it, and he still believes in it.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that I want. He's a guy I want with his hands on the floor. I want him as a guy that's willing to play some defense. If I'm Minnesota, because Minnesota is a playoff team.
Yeah.
If I'm Minnesota, I want Marcus Smart on the floor for me in the postseason. I just don't know what I'm willing to get to give up to get him. And I think that's the question that the Timberwolves have to answer.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of teams have to answer. I think, there are many situations, as we've been discussing, where you kind of have to decide and be on the same page about what you're willing to give up. And that's the hard part. In the media, like, we don't know what Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge are willing to part with right now today. Now, this summer, that answer is going to be different. Who the hell knows what what Minnesota is willing to part with. I agree with you. I wouldn't be trading my young guys, but if that's what it takes, and you believe you can make an NBA Finals run or a deep playoff run right now with the roster you have, then go ahead and do it. What do you say? So I just think that depending on the situation, they value different players at a different level, and that's ultimately what decides what gets done.
Yeah, and I just think that it is going to be interesting to see exactly what. As I apologize, I am breaking a major rule of engagement on the show.
You're casual.
I'm messaging back and forth
With who?
With somebody of note. So I'm just trying to figure out like how close can the Jazz get to making a Harrison Barnes deal?
I mean, again, it just depends on what, first of all, it depends on how willing the Kings are to have the conversation. So obviously the Jazz are what we call a finalist to, get involved in a Harrison Barnes situation, meaning they're like one of the deals that the Kings are considering. But the first round pick thing, I think, is a big hurdle. I think if I'm the Kings, I'm not even humoring a Harrison Barnes deal without a first round pick. But
am I humoring a deal for a pick that's 4 years down the street? I'm not.
No. So I don't know, man. It's tough. It's really tough. I think that. Can the Jazz get it done? Yeah, they could get it done, but it's going to have to take one hell of a sales job by Danny Ainge.
And here's the other thing, not to be redundant, because I think I said this before, but can you include Jordan Clarkson as a topper on a deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could, but obviously the money has to work
at
properly.
What cost? Because if you trade for Harrison Barnes, he's one of your top 5 guys.
Right, yeah.
Right?
He's experienced, and he would be experienced to other teams, like the Jazz or whatever team that you're looking at because of his postseason experience.
So again, for the Kings to make a Harrison Barnes deal, they have to get somebody who can be in that spot.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So let's surmise that that's Bojan Bogdanovic.
Mm-hmm.
As we've been told, the Jazz are freely offering Bojan Bogdanovic in trade.
Right.
So if you, let's say 1-to-1, Harrison Barnes, Bojan Bogdanovic, I don't think there's anybody on this show or listening to this show who wouldn't jump up and down in peaceful and happiness to make that deal.
Right.
We'd all love to make that deal today, right now.
Right.
Only problem is the Kings won't make that deal. Okay, so what am I going to have to include? Okay, what do the Jazz have to offer the Sacramento Kings? Okay, well, here's Joe's $13 million expiring contract, right? Okay. But I don't have a near-term first-round pick I can put in that deal, right? I don't have a near-term second-round pick I can put in that deal. So let me offer Jordan Clarkson. Because they're not going to take Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal is of very little value to the Sacramento Kings.
Right.
They have that guy in repetition. So my question is, if you were to include a guy like Jordan Clarkson in that deal, I think it makes the deal untenable for the Jazz. Because I can plug in Harrison Barnes. I can plug in Rashawn Holmes. But who's going to replace the value that Jordan Clarkson has to this Jazz team?
Well, what value has he brought this season? Because he has not been good this year.
Well, I agree that his shot percentage has not been good.
But I think it's more than just like the shot percentage hasn't been good. But what have we also heard? We've heard that, as part of the Rudy conversations earlier this week and late last week, when we told you that, Rudy is a guy who wants to call it his teammates, Jordan Clarkson's been the poster child for that, right? Hey,
Jordan
you need to make the
Clarkson
extra pass
and Jordan Clarkson and Donovan Mitchell. And I think we reported this first. There is absolutely friction in the Jazz locker room. There is no doubt about that. Do they hate each other? They don't. But it is uncomfortable between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And I think that Jordan Clarkson is the second guy that Rudy Gobert complains about. And when I look at Jordan Clarkson's numbers, this is a guy that gives you every game. He's there 75, 80 games a year. He gives you, this year his numbers are off, I would agree. He's giving you 15.5 points a game, right? He's giving you 3.5 rebounds, 2.5 dimes. Like, he's a contributor. This is the reigning sixth man of the year who stepped back a little bit, and he's still giving you 15.5 points. The problem is he also turns the ball over quite a bit.
Yeah.
He is good for 2 turnovers a game. And his 3 ball is a little bit erratic. When he's on, he's great. When he's off, he's horrendous. But I just ask you again, who are you going to replace that production with? Because you're not playing Elijah, you're not playing Jared Butler, you're hesitantly playing Trent Forrest. I don't see that you can trade both Bogey and Jordan Clarkson. I think Jordan Clarkson has real value to this team.
Yeah. Because
he brings you energy, and good and bad. He brings you energy, but he also brings you 15.5 points a game off the bench.
Yeah.
And he's also, by the way, I would also surmise, in summary on Jordan Clarkson, he's also going to the basket a hell of a lot more right now. And some of that is where the turnovers are coming from, because he is not an adept guy when he picks the ball up. But I think a lot of his turnovers are mental. Yeah. I think he just relaxes and gets lackadaisical. But my point is, Jordan Clarkson has real value to this team.
Yeah, I can see it both ways. I can see why the Jazz would want to move him and include him in a deal. I also see what you're saying, that he does have value, the 15 points a night off the bench. I get that. But I also think that, his contribution could be replaced by them playing better basketball, meaning them running better offense, moving the ball more, getting better looks. Like, I think it's been a real struggle for this team to score consistently over the course of this season. So we'll see. I think there's a lot of possibilities. All
right, let's get some of your comments in here. There are a lot of you commenting. I really appreciate you guys being here every day. Thank you. We could not cough on the microphone without you on a daily basis. Screw you in that coughing job. Edgar Garcia wants to talk about Trevor Bauer. We're going to do that in 5 minutes. Tanner Plummer says, hey, guys, I love the new drop, Jake.
Guys.
Where's it from?
Yeah, it's Trevor Bauer.
Where's it from?
It's Trevor Bauer.
Play it again.
It's Trevor Bauer.
Hey, guys.
You got to turn that up a little bit,
hey guys.
my man. We may have to adjust that. But
hey, guys.
Jeremy Bolton says, can't wait for the new shirts to drop, waiting for a medium. You already got that. Don't worry about it. Then going to order another one. Appreciate that. What's up, guys? What time are you planning? Giggity says to do shows in L.A. It'll be same time. It'll be 6:30 Mountain. We're going to get up very early. It's going to be fun. I don't think so. And Garcia says they screwed up big time doing the Conley Favors trade. Danny has his work cut out for him. He does. But Danny and Justin Zanuck have their work cut out. Ultimately, the tree is pretty clearly laid out. Like Ryan Smith, Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, support staff. So Danny's got the final say. If there's a deal to be had, my guess is Danny Ainge will do it.
Yeah.
Tanner says, in my opinion, the Kings basically destroyed their rebuilding process. They're pretty much starting over. I don't think they are. Nah. I think the Kings want to make the playoffs, and I think they're going to stop going young and they're going to start going older. I think they would love to remake the Mike Bibby, Chris Webber era in Sacramento and build around veteran players. And I think Domantas Sabonis is a guy that they feel like is 25 years old. Will you look that up for me real quick? I think Sabonis is 25 years old. And he's a guy that they feel like can be the center of their franchise, and literally the center figuratively.
Yeah, see what he did there. See what he did there. Yeah, center and stuff. Yeah.
But he's 25 years old, and he's a guy that I think a lot of people. I heard one of the local.
Yeah, he's 25 years old.
Yeah, one of the local Jazz beat writers said that he is an older player. Domantas Sabonis is not an old player. He's not an older player. He's 25 years old. He's been in the league 5 years. He played at Gonzaga. Like he's a guy that you can build around because he's multifaceted.
Dude, he's 25 years old, 6'11", 240. Like, the guy can play.
The guy can absolutely play. So I think they're going to build older, not younger anymore. Jeremy Bolton, what's up? Good morning, buddy. He says, so with all these moves Portland is doing, is Dame going to stay put or is he gone? No, I think they're ready to take one more run with Damian Lillard. I think that's why he will not play again this year. That's why he had the surgery. He's 31, but essentially he's going to have a year off after playing in the playoffs. And, I mean, don't forget, this is a team I think that's made the playoffs 9 straight years.
Bro, how many guys who played in the Olympics are hurt?
Oh, man. And I think Damian needed the rest. I think this has worked out very well for Dame's career. So, no, I think they're going to build and take one more year. Mr. E says Danny Ainge got very bad heritage from Dennis Lindsey, and I don't think the Jazz fans realize that. He was left with a bag of crap on the front porch.
Correct.
I mean, he does not have a lot of assets. Jeremy Bolton says Greg Odom has played more games in the NBA than Zion. Zion Williamson's a joke at this point.
Yeah.
And again, I'll just go back, and I know a lot of you hate when I do this. I told you so on Zion Williamson.
Yeah.
I've been saying this I've been
a Ja guy since the draft, dude.
Back to the shitty radio station in Phoenix, we were telling you Zion Williamson at his body type, the way he is physically built, it will be very difficult for him to stay healthy. I think when he's played, he's shown that he can be a number one guy, but he's got to make more three-pointers and he's got to lose weight. And I just don't know that he has the physical and physiological ability to lose weight because he is a big dude in those knees and ankles and feet. What has he had issues with? His knees and his feet. Because he's a big guy that likes to play up in the air. That is not a recipe to stay healthy in the NBA. It's just not. And I don't buy for a second that he's under $3 billion. I really don't.
As of December 8th of 2021, the rumored number was 317.
Yeah,
At 6'6", you're 317.
And they're selling him at 265.
Yeah, well, no, that's where he needs to play at. There's no way he's 265.
There ain't a chance in the world.
Not a chance.
He had lost a bunch of weight in his rookie season.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, he just, I don't know that ever works out. Greg Hawkins, what is up? Tanner Plummer says, hey, Greg. Okay. Let's see. Mr. E says, but if we don't have leverage now, why would we have leverage in the offseason? Because the appetite for restructuring in the offseason is far more.
Yeah.
You don't make a Rudy Gobert trade in the middle of the season. You make that in the summer.
It's like the Ben Simmons, James Harden situation.
Yes.
A lot of people, there's definitely been some momentum building towards Harden being traded at the deadline, but most people think it's going to happen in the summer because that's a huge deal that, takes a lot of detail work and there's a lot that goes into it.
But Steve Nash said something that was really interesting. He said the other day James Harden will not be traded. Then he said yesterday we need to focus on what's going to happen after Thursday, which is a very different answer than James won't be traded.
Yeah.
And I think
there's a chance.
I think it's
better than 50%. I think it's like 60-65% he'll get traded.
Yeah, I think there's a chance. James Knight, I don't understand what you mean. The Jazz have a ring in Whiteside. Okay. Olivier Roots says there's a rumor about Josh Richardson getting traded to the Jazz. What's your take on this? Sorry if you already mentioned it. Well, no, it's cool. I mean, listen, we've been talking about the Jazz and the Celtics making a trade for going on 3 weeks now. And they had very serious talks about Marcus Smart. But when those rumors got out that the Jazz were talking to the Celtics about Marcus Smart, several other teams went to Boston and inquired. And that's what happens. And that's how this Minnesota and Boston have been talking about a trade for months.
Yeah.
So none of this stuff just happens overnight. A lot of these trades that are happening now for the deadline have been talked about since last summer. Hey, let's talk about it later. And you have to understand that there are relationships that are in place in the NBA, and that very rarely can Danny Ainge call another general manager at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and be like, hey, we got 2 hours. You want to make a deal? What do you have? What are you willing? It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
These conversations have been going on for months, and these relationships are years and years and years old. So, I mean, if you think about Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge, that's a teenage college year relationship. So that's exactly how relationships and trades get done, because guys know guys for years. So my guess is that Danny Ainge knows what deal he's going to make. And there are deals that are done right now that you don't know about. And I'm telling you, today is going to be, in my opinion, today is going to be a very active day. Today is going to be a very active day. Today's the day where you get a Jeremy Grant trade, if that's to happen.
Yeah.
Today's the day where the Washington Wizards, excuse me, man with this cough. Today's the day where the Washington Wizards wind up unloading a Montrezl Harrell, a Dinwiddie. And I think those are deals that the Jazz need to be a third team on. That's how you wind up with Harrison Barnes.
Yeah.
Is you figure out a creative way to get the Kings what they need so that you end up with Harrison Barnes. So I think that those are the kind of deals that will happen today. Blockbusters take weeks to build. Weeks and weeks to build. James Harden and Ben Simmons have been talked about for weeks now.
Yeah.
They're just trying to play. Right now, you also have major blockbuster deals like Simmons and Harden, where you have two general managers that are playing chicken.
Yeah.
Because I think Bobby Marks wants that deal to get done. If I'm the Brooklyn Nets, I want that deal to get done. Yeah, I think it has to get done. I don't know how, if you are the Brooklyn Nets, you can any longer count on James Harden to be part of the solution.
Right.
Because one, he doesn't play enough, and two, you need a guy that'll be there for the last 20 games of the year, night in and night out. Kyrie's not that guy. KD's not that guy. James Harden's not that guy. Ben Simmons could be that guy. And when Ben Simmons gets healthy or gets acquired, all of a sudden Kevin Durant's knee feels a little bit better.
It does, doesn't it?
Right? And I mean, it just invigorates the roster. And then I think you also have buyout season that's going to be significant this year, because there's a lot of people who believe if the Lakers are unable to trade Russell Westbrook, who I still think is his best option is Houston in a buyout,
yeah,
that the Lakers are going to try and buy him out, because they've benched him 3 times now.
Yeah. They have to do something about it.
Yeah.
They can't just continue to go down this path.
And Garcia says, Quinn has to go. I have one name for you. He has history with Danny as a player and as an assistant coach, and he's definitely paid his dues. Sam Cassell. You know what? I've heard a lot of people bring up Sam Cassell as a head coach. And I think eventually, I just don't know that stylistically, I'm curious what he would bring. A rookie first-time coach doesn't strike me as the right decision on this roster. It really does not. I mean, I would much more guess that you would get a veteran coach. And I don't know. I don't even know who that would be at this point.
Yeah. But that's why I say that's a summer conversation. I mean, that's
yes. You're not doing that now.
That's not even on the radar right now,
Yeah, and this is this is Billy Donovan to the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
He was the right guy at the right time. I think you need to make that move in the summer. They are not changing coaches now.
The Jazz have a plan. Let's be really clear. The Jazz have a plan and an understanding about what they want to do in the next 18 months with this roster. And
Absolutely.
I would guess the head coach is part of that conversation. And I think that because you have to think about this. It's not like the Jazz, and specifically Danny Ainge, can just go to people and be like, hey, come be our head coach. Everything's fine and dandy here, right? I mean, the conversations are way deeper than that. The head coaching candidate is going to consider everything to consider. Like, hey, what's the location? Is this good for my family? Do I like the situation you guys are in? Do I like the plan to get better? Do I want to coach Donovan Mitchell? Is Donovan Mitchell coachable? Like, these are all things that a head coaching candidate would/should consider. And so I think right now the move or frankly the lack of moves that you would make at the deadline, number one, are going to affect that decision. Number two, the plan heading into the summer about, specifically with, Rudy Gobert and this roster and what you plan to do to figure out how to make all this work together is also going to contribute to who you're able to hire as a head coach, right? Remember the D'Antoni years, specifically in Houston. specifically with the Suns. What was D'Antoni known for? Being an offensive guy, get up and down, shoot early in the shot clock, right? So he's not a fit for a team that wants to play slow 22-second basketball, right?
I would agree.
So that's why I say your plan and how you're going to go about things here in Salt Lake or in Utah is definitely going to affect the candidates that you can go and get. And we need to make sure that we understand that, because you can't just go out and get anybody.
Yeah, and again, I think Sean Marks is I think I said Bobby Marks. Sean Marks is a very savvy guy. I mean, he's the general manager of the Brooklyn Nets. That's a team, and you have to understand what the standings are in the East. And I think it's interesting. You look at the Celtics. I think this is why Malik Beasley is such an important figure in any Minnesota trade. I think that's why when you look at where Marcus Smart may potentially be landing, you've got to get assets in return, and you've got to get guys that can contribute right now, which is why I think that the Jazz are out on Marcus Smart, because, as I said yesterday, I was told that deal's dead because the Jazz just don't have something to offer. Their best asset is probably a Joe Ingles contract, and that's not of value to somebody like Boston, who, for all intent and purposes, is what, a game out. 2 games out of the 5th spot in the East.
And that's the other thing. I mean, if you're any of these teams, not including the Jazz, like if you're any of these teams, the last thing you want to do is make a deal that's going to mess up what you already have going. I mean, that's the worst case scenario to ruin a vibe, like what you were saying with the Suns. So, again, the Nets, the Lakers, any of these best teams in the league that are struggling right now, they just understand they got to get in. Just get into the tournament, get into the postseason, and go from there. That's what it is for a lot of these teams. So I think the conversation around not messing up what you already have is real for most of these teams.
Well, and again, I think this goes back to Washington. Washington is a game and a half out of a playoff spot, but I think they realize making the playoffs might not be their best path forward. And now with Brad Beal,
his name is Bradley.
My bad. Now with the Brad Master Flash out of the lineup in Washington with wrist surgery for the rest of the year, I think it is inevitable that team has to make a significant deal at the deadline.
Yeah.
I think you need Dinwiddie and really I think Montrezl Harrell is a guy that has a lot of value to playoff teams. I mean, if you look around just in the East, I mean, how many teams in the top 6 spots in the East need a big?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about Miami, probably not with Bam Adebayo, but if you look at the Bulls, you look at the Bucks, certainly with Brook Lopez's situation, you look at the Boston Celtics, who are in the 7th spot, tied for the 6th spot with Toronto. Toronto's another team. Should Toronto be a buyer or seller right now?
Yeah, it's a great question.
And when you have a guy like Fred VanVleet, who the franchise that's your guy. Trading a guy like Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby, those are huge decisions, because you're a top 6 team in the East. But what does that really mean? Are you a championship contender? Pascal Siakam's one of the most frustrating talents in the NBA, because you rarely get the top 25% of his ability on the floor for the Raptors.
Yeah.
So if you send him, like the Miami Heat supposedly are one of the teams interested in Pascal Siakam, if I'm the Raptors, am I trading Pascal Siakam to the Miami Heat? Probably not, because you're going to run into that guy in the playoffs for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. If you are anybody in the East, are you trading with the number 1 team in Miami who's trying to get better? Are you trading with who is the team in the East that's going to trade a center to the Chicago Bulls and make them a legitimate contender to win the East? Because the Bulls, with all of their injuries, are a big man short of really being a solid. Montrezl Harrell is a Chicago Bull. You can let Vucevic start. You can play him 30 minutes a night. Montrezl Harrell can absolutely give you 18 minutes a night.
Right.
He makes the Chicago Bulls. John Collins is a guy that's been linked to the Chicago Bulls. I mean, if John Collins winds up with the Chicago Bulls, it's over.
Yeah.
I think to me, those are the questions you have to ask yourself. Like, look at Atlanta's decline has been steep.
Right.
Like, this is a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're 10th in the East, 2 games under 500.
Man. Struggle bus.
But they're 4 out of the 5th spot. So there's a lot of conversation to go on around that.
Yeah.
But I think these conversations are huge. All right, let's wrap up with some of your comments. Olivier Roots says Jingles minutes should go to Pascal. I think you can give Eric Pascal some of Joe's minutes, but he's limited in what you need in that role. I would tell you that I would play Pascal Eric Pascal far more than I would be playing Royce O'Neal.
Right.
Those are the minutes I would take away. I'd take away Royce's minutes and give them to Eric Pascal. I have no doubt about that. Brylark says the Jazz hang on to these players too long. They need to get them in, determine if they're good enough to develop and play, and if they are not, they need to trade them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Tyler P. says, realistically, the Jazz will end up with Gary Harris and re-sign House. Well, Daniel House is an interesting guy right now because he's not under contract. And he's a guy that I think is kind of twisting in the wind here. I know the Jazz would like to have him.
Yeah, I like him a lot.
But if you sign him for the rest of the season, that kind of hurts you at the trade deadline. So it takes a little flexibility away. But if you're just going to let him twist in the wind, he's a guy that's got value. He's played very well for the Jazz. You can't tell me there's not another team out there willing to give him a deal for the rest of the year.
Yeah, for sure.
So you're playing a dangerous game with House, and I think ultimately he's going to have to make a decision. We'll see. I think that's a good point. I really think that's a good point. C. Sheever says, I think you should get T-shirts that say "at the end of the day." I probably should. I say that a lot.
Yeah.
And Garcia says the Jazz remind me of the early 2000 Raiders, overpaying a bunch of old talent, thinking they could actually win a championship. Ultimately, they will end up in limbo for decades. I don't think so. It is what it is. Av Lee says, I think Clarkson is an asset to keep, just someone needs to tame him. Replace Gobert, get three pieces, preferably young, long, athletic players. I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
What happens if Joe isn't traded? Would the Jazz bring him back? I don't know.
Again, a summer conversation.
James Knight, I don't know.
It depends.
He is going to be here in Utah. I heard him on the TV broadcast the other night talking about his rehab, and so I think it's definitely a possibility. You have to see what he comes out as. What does he come out as a player after the knee? Yeah. That'll be interesting. Cody Strickland says Mike Conley, Bogey, and JC for Kyrie. Yeah. Good luck. Eric and Raleigh says, no team is taking the albatross of a contract that Gobert has. Let's talk about that in the summer. Yeah. What you guys think about the Warriors versus the Jazz tonight?
I think that it's going to be a good game.
I do too. I think small ball lineup in full effect is what I think.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I want to say that the Jazz are going to, compete in this game, and it's going to be a really tight game all the way down to the end. But I have a feeling. I just have a feeling that the Warriors are a little bit too athletic and they shoot the three ball at a high percentage. So that's always tough. If the Warriors are playing their best basketball, they're better than the Jazz. If the Warriors are shooting, 30% from three, then the Jazz got a pretty good shot to win the game.